So first of all, really, just we've got to grasp the scale of our defeat. Just we've got to face up to it. The reason I say that is my day job is in Parliament, and I can tell you that the Parliamentary Labour Party, it's in a state of deep and profound denial about the reality of what has happened to it. So the first thing is really that, and to recognise that Labour is no longer the object of affection of working class people, and the government is the object of affection, because in 3 days they're going to do what the Liberal progressive ruling class said could not be done. That is that we will be leaving the EU. And the thing to grasp with the scale of the defeat, and then the disintegration of Labour as the tribune of the working class, which has been for more than a century, is an enormous loss, and is the result. Well, the last 4 years are one thing, but this trend has been going on for really a very long time, as the class basis of the Labour Party has changed, and the Labour Party has become much more middle class, much more liberal, much more graduate, and essentially signed in to what we used to laugh at school, the Whig theory of history. The future lay with no borders, technology would mean that democracy was subordinated, that we would all become middle class. And imagine trying to comprehend for people who were taught that at university, distinguished professors, I'm sure, that the direction of history was towards those things. Globalization, liberalism, the middle class, multilateral treaties. And imagine trying to comprehend that these 4 things define the future, really. And the first is that the nation state is much more important than was considered. The second is the working class matter. And it's to be recognised that we're the ones who said the working class didn't matter. We're the ones who abandoned them. The third aspect of that is, is that democracy is not finished. I mean, this was what was at stake all these mad 3 years that we've been to. Was this referendum going to count? And obviously the Labour position was to say, no, you stupid, ignorant, brilliant concept I've heard, never heard it before, undereducated, that people are undereducated, do it again, with Leave not really being on the agenda, that democracy matters, the working class matters, the nation state matters, and the hardest thing for us to eat really is that the force that's going to shape the future more than anything, more than socialism, is conservatism. Is that. So you can understand why the PLP is in a state of what my mum would call, very nice word, don't hear it, discombobulation. She would say to me, Maurice, you're discombobulated. And no, I'm not. And that I recognise as the condition of the progressive ruling class. And they can't really cope. And in all of that mix, we have to recognise that a sense of trust in democracy was held and carried by the working class. When all had abandoned that idea that voting mattered was absolutely central, and that we'd abandon that, and that is linked to all the other things that liberalism says does not exist: a sense of place, a sense of belonging, a sense of responsibility to others. We really did get into a place where none of that mattered, and where talking about patriotism became, what Lee said, like a form of fascism. When obviously we've all got a commitment to making the country a good place, and above all, that was carried by the working class, who then, did what we thought they'd never do. They voted Tory, and they voted Tory, and I went out. I've only been to a couple of places since the elections. I went to Grimsby, and I went up to West Brom to do Labour meetings, and I got no sense of repenting. I got no sense that a quiet dignity has descended and get Brexit done. And then the other thing we've got to recognise, talking about this, is that now we have a Conservative government that is completely committed to breaking state aid rules and breaking competition law as regards the EU. That they say they're gonna. I mean, Eddie, they're going to say they're going to reverse beaching and restore the track. I think that's right. They're going to not build symbolic bridges. They're going to build real bridges. They're going to revive the steel industry. They're going to build, they say, 500,000 homes over 9 years. I mean, it was scary in Parliament. Boris Johnson's first words were, "Over the next 10 years, we will." Right? And we were just sitting there like, oh, liar. You know, that's basically the response of the left. You're a liar, you're a shagger, and you eat too much. I mean, how can we believe anything you say? Leaving on Friday. You know, this is the scale at which we became moralistic, puritanical, horrible denunciators. And meanwhile, life goes on, and life will go on. And the object of the Conservative Party is to consolidate the new class coalition. So let's just get that. So, I mean, this is the amazing thing. Seamus Milne and Andrew Murray were lauding it in Parliament as the Marxists. The people with a class analysis ran on what? Globalisation and liberal values. Meanwhile, the Tories had a completely class-based analysis. They couldn't care less about anything other than targeting the working class, getting the shift, the class shift, and they did that by renunciating without a second's thought. 30 years of Thatcherism, austerity, just forget it. Just all gone. Dominic Cummings, who's become, the hate figure. I mean, just understand it this way. Boris Johnson is Henry VIII. Dominic Cummings is Thomas Cromwell. Michael Gove is Archbishop Cranmer. There's a government at work. And they will consolidate a new settlement based on a new class coalition for the Conservative Party in which the working class are going to be made to feel at home. And the culture of Labour, sanctimonious, rejectionist, middle class, puritanical, is not going to be a hospitable place. And to do that politics, and the Conservatives will do anything to consolidate that new class coalition. So, where do we lie? In the future, I would say that first of all is, our political economy. I accept that, Chair, but so I'll do a political economy in 2 minutes. Essentially, to restore a socialist political economy in which human beings and the natural environment are not commodities, that we must resist through association and through the renewal of trade unions, but above all through the renewal of that democracy is the way that you resist the domination of the rich and the educated. That's how it's done. And Labour used to understand that completely and work within the ideas, ideals and practices of the people who live in the country. So there needs to be a real rejection of globalisation, a real reckoning with the inability of liberalism to give either meaning or any analysis of the world. The relationships, historical attachments, place, tradition, we have to work within all of that. And we're going to have to get used to a government saying and acting, and just to give you, this is a direct quote from Dominic Cummings, is that we are going to implement a socialist economic policy that gives a priority to the working class. Right? That's straightforward. Why? Because that's our new class coalition and we will consolidate it. Right? So if we stand on the side of that, saying we want ever closer alignment with the EU, with the customs union, with the single market, with the ECJ, there is no future. The left just has become liberalism. At the end of, this is what I said to Seamus Milne, and I'll end there, the end of Don Quixote, he goes on all this journey and he comes back home and he's got all these donkeys filled with gifts and things that he's bought from the world, and his mum says to him, "What did you learn on your travels?" And Don Quixote said, I learned that the sun rises in the east and it sets in the west. I learned that mothers love their children, and I learned that God is great. And she looks at all this stuff And she said, well, what a lot of luggage for such a short journey. And that's the final line of the book, so you don't need to read it. But the thing is, if Labour just ends up as a left liberal party, if all the left can do is be the defenders of globalisation, then we too can say to each other, you know, what a lot of luggage for such a short journey. We'd just be the Whigs and the Liberals and get defeated by the Conservatives every time. So the way ahead is to actually renew and rediscover our tradition. The Labour tradition, which was of the working class, by the working class and for the working class, where people like me, I've always viewed myself as a kind of backstage bloke who's read a few books and can help things along. But they've become the leadership. And we really have to renew our tradition, our analysis of the world, that capitalism, the force of capitalism is to turn you into a commodity. And the working class were born with a poor law state, which was just to turn them into an administrative unit. We have to assert the human status of people, really the sacred status of nature, and organise ourselves around the protection of those things from the domination and humiliation by the rich and the educated people. Thank you.